the first to know in Nsem-Pii.
The fourth estate, Suleiman Brahma. Na Nsem na Ashasi Abai. Na eno na samo Brian Boabe. Ede atuga say, there is some fishy deal. Na then a bass as some Brian Boabe ede nsema atuga. I'm a lawyer Paul admochiri. Ede munchiri mu etuga. Eti for ni nyina ne say, Oma targeti Same Awuku MP omo tata ye the fourth estate. Meanwhile, our national lotteries Nsem. Meanwhile, enema esesa omo ye, the esesa omo ye omo mfa omo din fa nyina. And as some brand boaben say ontwenda. Saa de ne mom publish omo makani nyina din. Obo MPs bia omo ye NDC MPs. Suhini ni di wom omo nyina masheda asion. Na lawyer boss ebe no won say Suleiman Brahma pa beje de mudie na okata side so no de o doubt but still yesi na eno na ede asem no beba no na fe de yenko the next na the fourth estate as a target yankasa bantama MP bantama asenso boachi ade ya o ne babe investigation edna to tankuram sikebi fourth estate edi enko na mo pe MPP MP so enya honko na say see we na why never 2024 for the NDC and for shocking Haruna Idrisu endorse the vice president friends Jenna na Opkwajma wamra Julius Debra enia na Asiedu Nketiah so thank you to na eno na lawyer person no adwiri no ko DS no ade a enho na yin His Excellency John Dramani Mahama School UN and Nsem de bi atuka embra yencha mo yenko tie mra lawyer Paul admochire de nsem nyina atuga yenko tie ayencha mra
over the places been all over the place. Okay, let me do that first before I come to these two gentlemen. Or you want me to? Well, yeah, I'll keep with the story. There are two important, very juicy stories, both of them coming up. And so Suleiman Brahma has been accused of all sorts of things. I believe that is not true. So we'll talk about it. Now, we are here one day and the fourth estate issues, they say they are investigating something. They are an investigative organization, the newspaper, they do that quite a bit, public interest investigations. And they said that Samuel Awuku has paid money to some people, something, you know. It's like a CSR, corporate social responsibility. The argument of the fourth estate is that it's supposed to be for good causes, and good causes supposed to go to underprivileged in the society. They find that a lot of the money went to places where it is not, they cannot describe as underprivileged in the society. I'm not sure how that is actionable under the Criminal Offences Act, whether it is criminal or whether they're going to project it as a crime. I'm not so sure what they want to do, or they just simply want to embarrass those that they have mentioned, and also someone like who of NLA. I'm not going to look at those that they've mentioned because they are not part of the conversation. But the real issue here is that Samuel Brian Boabing is telling Suleiman Brahma that he has left out something, that he had advertised that a company called KGL was in a bad bed with NDC. He has said that KGL, which is a very famous, powerful company, very, very good company, that he, Suleiman Brahma, had alleged that KGL was in bed with NLA in a bad way, in a corrupt way, and that he was going to expose it, you know, bring back Suleiman Brahma. But Samuel Brian Boabing is saying that, yeah, Brian Boabing yes, Samuel Brian Boabing here is saying that after Suleiman Brahma met KGL, he changed his mind, alleging all sorts of things. And Suleiman, good evening, how are you? I don't know if Suleiman Brahma doesn't do that. He doesn't do what Samuel is alleging is that Suleiman Brahma went to meet the business people and something exchanged hands. So after advertising that he was going to publish the story, he didn't do the story anymore. It's a kind of journalism that many people are against. It's journalism they call it entrepreneurship or investigative journalism, entrepreneurship, something like that. Journalists who are entrepreneurs by selling stories, basically that. That's what he's alleging against Suleiman Brahma. And I do not believe that Suleiman Brahma works for the fourth estate. They present themselves as a paragons of integrity. And so, Suleiman, your integrity is being questioned by Samuel Brian Boabing. He said you held a meeting with KGL. After that, you're not publishing the story. Where is the KGL story? I believe that you are doing a good job. I believe that he's doing a good job. I do not believe that he is entrepreneurship, the work that he's doing at the fourth estate. I don't believe so. But this is what this is what Samuel Barber been strongly alleging against him. And he has some instances that he published a story with, that's what the Fourth Estate usually does. All of these investigative agencies do that, announce that, say they bring the story up and say, wait for it, it's coming. And So he did the wait for it, it's coming with KGL. According to Samuel Barber, he went to have meetings with the KGL people. And since then, he's gone numb on the KGL story. Brian Boabin is therefore alleging that Suleiman Brahma has been influenced. We don't know whether that's true or not, but that's a strong allegation against Suleiman Brahma. Suleiman Brahma, these are the paragons of integrity. This is what Brian Boabin says. He says, still waiting for the Fourth Estate to release its mischievous infographics showing how much the Gamanche, Al-Hassan Suhini MP, Peter Lanchen Tobu MP, and others took from the NLA, just as they did for APN, DI, and the Rebecca Foundation. And when will that NLA KGL story, which their boss Suleiman Brahma hinted at, finally drop? So Brian Boabin is alleging that the Gamanche, His Majesty, Al-Hassan Suhini, our friend from Tamale Central, and Tamale North, I believe, and Peter Chobu, the former policeman who is now a member of parliament, that they all benefited from the NLA within the same context of the good causes thing. That why is Suleiman Brahma not mentioning them? And then Suleiman Brahma chooses to mention Dankwa Institute and Rebecca Foundation and all that. But by the way, Suleiman Brahma said there's something on KGL, and that KGL story is never coming. And he's alleging that Suleiman Brahma has been influenced. I believe that if Suleiman Brahma met KGL, it is in keeping with his journalistic work. If you have a story about somebody, you meet them and listen. I suspect that when he listened to them, he came to the conclusion that his original ideas were wrong and that he had been ill-informed, and so he didn't publish the story. But it behooves Suleiman Brahma that if you are in that kind of situation, you have to publish it. That, oh, I've met KGL, I have listened to them, I have understood what it is. When we publish here about the Asante Achimba election, we met the MP and we told him that this is the information we have. He explained to us that this information you have is that we came back and said that we do not believe that there's a by-election, etc. So it behooves the journalist, Suleiman Brahma, to come out and explain, having alerted the public that you have something on a company called KGL, that they are in cahoots with the National Lottery Authority, and that there's some corruption brewing over there. Once you have made that allegation, you need to really come and tell us that I made the allegation, but I do not stand by those allegations anymore because I've had explanations given to me. But if you don't do it, then you are definitely going to have Brian Boabin and co. allege against Suleiman Brahma that you have taken something from the KGL people, something which they don't do. Suleiman Brahma doesn't do that. He's a paragon of integrity. The Fourth Estate, they present themselves as a paragon of integrity. But by the way, if they've done something, they should know that people will hear. I mean, as for that, it always happens. Somebody will tell somebody that, when he came and when I was going to see him, that happened. So really, I don't know whether that is good or bad, but I also know that the people at Fourth Estate, they are paragons of integrity. I'll leave it here until further investigations, because we are going to talk to people and find out. We are going to ask Samuel Barber to give us, if he has some evidence, to share with us, and then we'll come here and share with you. So that we'll go on with it. Okay, so that story that I now hear that the Fourth Estate, as part of this story, are targeting the member of parliament for Bantama. That Asensu Boache is their next target. I don't understand why. Fourth Estate, is it true that Asensu Boache is your next target after Samuel Awuku? I don't know why. The honorable member of parliament, former minister for rules, former deputy chief of staff, opened a beautiful office for the MPP in his constituency in Bantama. This is one of the constituencies that has served MPP very well. They've been winning many votes there. They've had several MPs, including Richard Anane and Cecilia Dapa and Kokofu and all that. Asansu Boache is now the MP, and after serving one term, he was able to construct a beautiful office, and the occasion was great because it was it had J. Ekufor and Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo both participating on that occasion. So Asensu did that. Now, I'm hearing that after Samuel Oku, Fourth Estate is coming on Asensu Boache for some contracts. I don't understand it. But anyway, somebody wrote an article about something the Fourth Estate is doing. The kinds of things they are talking about. Samuel Oku gave this money here. Those things can excite people, you see. But it's not germane to the development agenda. This is the problem sometimes I have with them. They focus on little things they call corruption. They get very excited about something that it doesn't have any real impact What it does is that it makes the people like the journalists because, hey, he was able to catch a thief who stole 8,000 and all of that. But it doesn't make journalism of impact, significant impact is important. They talk about saving money and all of that. And they've been saving money for 10 years and there's still a problem. There's a systemic structural difficulty with the democracy that must be addressed by the media. Constitutional amendment, what a minister can do, levels of competence, what do people achieve? Those are fundamental to changing our situation. Not Samia Oku gave 50,000 to Madina MP and it's under good causes and they should have given it to the Disabled Society of Ghana. Yes, I agree with that. But should that form a big part of our conversation standing here this evening talking about that? I don't know. The Ghanaian people should decide. But we hear that As3m Aba is the next target. So we'll see how that goes anyway. All right, let me do US in it. Very, very interesting. The pollster Musa Danquah has consistently published polls in the about the NDC and who is winning and who is not winning. And in those polls that Musa Danquah publishes, As3m Haruna, the Minister for Education, is always coming up tops. Two major polls that Musa Danquah has done. Haruna As3m has come up tops as the NDC person who can win the primaries. Very popular among rank and file, etc., etc. This week, whilst the president is away in New York, and whilst the president is away with the chief of staff, because that doesn't often happen, usually when the president travels, chief of staff is here. But this week, the president and the chief of staff have both traveled to New York for the General Assembly. I can understand that the chief of staff went in to give the president tacit support in his first General Assembly in his second incarnation as president. As3m Haruna has taken the opportunity, whilst the party chairman is doing a thank you tour, to name the successor to President Mahama that he is looking at. You know, one minister, very important minister, told somebody that in terms of the NDC ticket, all what we are seeing is not what the NDC wants. What the NDC really wants, he said, is Jenan Opoku-Agyeman number 1, Haruna As3m number 2. That's really the ticket that the NDC is going to move with. That's what the minister said. He said Jenan Opoku-Agyeman number 1, Haruna As3m number 2. So we all heard that, but we ignored it. This week, it looks like it's a plausible, very plausible conclusion for the NDC. Because Haruna As3m clearly endorsed Jenan Opoku-Agyeman for the 2028 ticket. Haruna As3m knows that Asiedu Nketiah is looking for it, that he's campaigning for it, that he's working towards it, that he's in fact in pole position. Haruna As3m knows that Julius Deba, the chief of staff, is looking for it, he's working for it, and he hopes to overtake Asiedu Nketiah. He knows that. But he said, Professor Jenan Opoku-Agyeman is the ticket holder. See the video. See it.
It's my prayer that God will give you long life and good health, that probably you will be elevated to become the first female president. I've been in cabinet with you, at least the first session of the cabinet and the second session of the cabinet. And I can say without fear of contradiction that you remain an unquestioned champion of education and gender rights and gender interests and inclusiveness generally in the pursuit of...
Haruna As3m, thank you very much for the lead you are giving us, and Professor Jenan Opoku-Agyeman, Vice President. Good luck in your endeavors to be elevated to the high office of first female president of the Republic of Ghana. Is that going to happen or not? Let's look at 2 Nations General Assembly. Later tonight, we have an interview in the studio about 10 Nations General Assembly. He spoke about, he gave a bit of history, and he spoke about the African equation, how Africa has become important to the United Nations, and the United Nations needs to address that Africa has become important, more important than it was 8 years ago, and therefore going forward to demand a permanent representation on the UN Security Council with a veto power for the African representation. This is John Dramani Mahama at the UN.
In the era of global uncertainty, Africa must exercise sovereignty over its natural resources to raise the necessary funds to ensure the well-being of its citizens. The days of parceling out vast concession areas to foreign interests for exploitation must come to an end. We'll continue to welcome foreign investment, but we must negotiate better for a bigger share of the natural resources that belong to us. And we must insist on value addition to these resources. We're tired of the continued image of poverty-stricken, disease-ridden rural communities living at the periphery of huge foreign-controlled natural resource concession areas. We're tired of having people extract the most they can from us and in return offer us the very least by way of respect, consideration, and dignity. We're tired of not being represented in ways that reveal the richness and complexity of our history or acknowledge all that we have overcome to arrive here in this liminal space of untold possibilities. The UN Founding Charter is outdated when it comes to representation in this August Assembly. The most powerful post-World War II nations are still being rewarded with an almost totalitarian guardianship over the rest of the world. And yet, the first sentence in Chapter 2, Article 1 of the UN Charter declares that the organization is based on the principle of sovereign equality of all its members. If this were true, and was the case, a continent as large as Africa, with its numerous UN member states, would have at least one permanent seat on the Security Council. Furthermore, we believe that veto power should not be restricted to only 5 nations, nor should it be absolute. There must be a mechanism in this House for the General Assembly to challenge a veto. No single nation should be able to exercise an absolute veto to serve its own interests in a dispute. In 1995, during the 50th anniversary of the United Nations, Nelson Mandela stood in this very spot, and he said, "The United Nations has to reassess its role, redefine its profile, and reshape its structures. It should truly reflect the diversity of our universe and ensure equity among the nations in the exercise of power within the system of international relations in general and the Security Council in particular." I close quotations. 30 years later, we African leaders are still making the same simple request for a permanent seat on the Security Council with the power of a veto. So today, Madam President, I stand here in this exact spot and ask the world, if not now, then when? We demand not only a reform of the Security Council, but also a reset of the global financial architecture, which is currently rigged against Africa. Africa must have a greater say in the world's multilateral financial institutions. And while I'm making requests, I'd like to call for the removal of the blockade on Cuba. As Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, our nation's founder, famously said, "We seek to be friends with all and enemies to none." The Cuban people shed their blood on African soil in the fight against apartheid. And indeed, Cuba has been and continues to be a faithful friend of Africa. You see, the very fact that I can stand here and ask these things and say these things.
That was President John Dramani Mahama talking about the African situation. He also spoke about the disturbances in Gaza. Here is the video.
Ghana recognized the state of Palestine in 1988 and supported a 2-state solution to the conflict since then. And I say, contrary to the claims of some, a 2-state solution would not be a reward for Hamas. It would rather be a reprieve for the hundreds of thousands of innocent women and children and people who are facing collective punishment and forced starvation for no reason other than the fact that they are Palestinian. For nearly 2 years and for the fear of reprisals, we here in this General Assembly have been playing hide and seek with language to find the right words to help us avoid or excuse what we all know is taking place in Gaza. But here's the thing, it doesn't matter what you call it. If it looks like a duck, it swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, well, then it must be a duck. The crimes in Gaza must stop.
Will deliver a speech at the UN. The philosophy is clear, and we wait to see how the United Nations will respond to Africa's what is now a very massive and legitimate demand for a seat at the UN Security Council. That's going to be very massive. Looking at what happens over the next few years with Donald Trump in charge in America, it's going to be very crucial Very, very interesting. Donald Trump's relationship with Europe and the Russia-Ukraine war still waging. Russia has a permanent seat and also a veto power, the Security Council. United Nations does, France does, United Kingdom does, China does as well. And I believe Italy, isn't it? Okay, so it's going to that happens. Kwame Nkrumah in the years ago, 60 years ago, was talking about these things. It's now come back firmly on the United Nations table. Let's take text messages.